Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my must-own wide receiver list for fantasy football in 2021. Inside of today's video, I'm going to be talking about 4 wide receivers that I really like based upon current ADP, that is average draft position. I'm going to be talking about these players past season in 2020, as well as how I project them to play in 2021 based upon the additions to their offense or the retractions in their offense. So if you guys do end up enjoying this video, having a great time, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. I also have recently posted must-own running backs, tight ends, as well as quarterbacks. This is the final video of the must-own or must-draft series on my channel, but it will be popping up again as the offseason goes on, as we get currently closer to 2021 fantasy football drafts in late August or early September. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first wide receiver that I want to be talking about today is wide receiver of the Chicago Bears, Allen Robinson. Now, the difference between 2020 and 2021 in the quarterback department, at least, is a huge difference. Last season for Allen Robinson, at the beginning of the year, it was Mr. MVP, the Nickelodeon MVP, Mitchell Trubisky. Kissing titties, Mitchell Trubisky played just about all right, and then 9-inch Nick Foles played, and then Trubisky played again. It was like kind of juggling of the quarterback position. It was just stupid, in my opinion. They probably should have just stuck with Mitch or stuck with Nick Foles, but in reality, they were just throwing him in and out, and it got very confusing. Now, in Allen Robinson's past, he has played with Blake Bortles, he has played with Mitch Trubisky, and Nick Foles. So when you think about a list of quarterbacks for a wide receiver who has put up very good numbers in fantasy football, Allen Robinson is typically a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football, and he has played with not the greatest quarterbacks. Again, Blake Bortles, not known to be the most supreme quarterback in the NFL. Sure, he is the king of garbage time fantasy football points. If you guys were playing back in the day, not back in the day, like 4 or 5 years ago when Blake Bortles was in his prime of scoring garbage time points, Allen Robinson was playing pretty good back then, played very good with the Chicago Bears, and now he's still with the Chicago Bears, but the quarterback change is going to be different. It is either going to be Andy Dalton or it is going to be Justin Fields. Now, I think at least at some point in this year, we will see Justin Fields, and we will be seeing Andy Dalton at some point in the season. Based upon current odds, Andy Dalton is listed to be the starter for week 1. Based upon odds, it's not a super big difference, though. Not a huge discrepancy between Andy Dalton and between Justin Fields to be the starter week 1. Now, obviously, I'm making this video on May 25th. There is a while to go until the NFL season starts, but you can still kind of speculate what's going to be happening. How many games do I think Fields is going to play? I honestly think Fields will play at least 8 games this season. I think that if Andy Dalton starts off bad, the fans in Chicago are going to be booing down to get Justin Fields into the game. They traded up with the New York Football Giants to get Justin Fields because they believe in him as their future quarterback. So why would he not play at least half the season? All it took was 1 game for Mike Glennon and his huge ass neck to get benched for Mitchell Trubisky. I don't think it will take all that long for Justin Fields to play with Allen Robinson, and I think that that's better for Allen Robinson. But again, Robinson was able to produce in the past with bad quarterbacks, so your mind shouldn't really be shaken from it being maybe Dalton or maybe being Mr. Justin Fields. So Allen Robinson in 16 games last year finished as wide receiver 9 in PPR, 11.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 12 in standard. And I also like to bring up the points per game perspective because that gives you a better idea on how the player was actually doing week in, week out, because Robinson played all 16 games. Most wide receivers don't play all 16 games, but everyone in this list played at least 14 games I'm going to be talking about today. From a points per game perspective, Allen Robinson was wide receiver 13 in PPR, 15.5 PPR, tied with Chris Godwin, and wide receiver 17 in standard, tied with Brandin Cooks, averaging 16.4 PPR points per game, 13.2 half PPR points per game, and 10.1 standard points per game. So Allen Robinson's season last year was pretty solid, even with the confusion at the quarterback position, because this wasn't necessarily just Trubisky and then it became Foles. It was Trubisky, then it's Foles, then Foles gets hurt, then it's Trubisky. It was just getting thrown all up in the air, and throughout that, it didn't really seem to matter which guy was the quarterback at the helm of their team. Allen Robinson was still able to produce, and even with, in my opinion, lackluster coaching from Matt Nagy, the head coach, who I think should not be the head coach anymore, he is still able to produce. Targets 151 last year, third highest at the wide receiver position for 102 total receptions. Fourth highest at wide receiver, 1,250 receiving yards, eighth highest at the wide receiver position, and 6 total touchdowns, 24th highest at the wide receiver position. So Allen Robinson is very, very talented at getting the ball into his hands. If the ball is thrown towards Allen Robinson, the guy is going to catch it. He commands the alpha role in this Chicago team very heavily. They don't really have a true wide receiver too. Now, they do have Anthony Miller, who I thought was going to end up getting traded. They still have Darnell, here comes the Monet, but they don't really have a defined wide receiver too. So that's why a guy like Allen Robinson gets so many targets in this offense. And it does not really matter if they double Allen Robinson, because the guy is still going to catch the ball. He is just that talented at the wide receiver position. Now, again, when you have a rookie quarterback go into the game, which I assume Justin Fields, again, will play at least 8 games. I just don't know why they would draft him and him not play at least half of the games on the season. So I think that will be the case. And with a rookie quarterback, typically you see a guy who wants to throw the ball to his best target, right? Because he knows even if he gets a little nervous and he overthrows him or throws a little too high or something, Allen Robinson will be able to go up and get it just based upon how the guy plays. Again, when we were talking about touchdowns before, projecting touchdowns at the wide receiver position is damn near impossible. Allen Robinson could have a good year next year. Would it surprise me if Robinson had 15 touchdowns next year? No, because he's the head honcho guy in Chicago. Would it surprise me if he had like 3? No, because it's just so hard to predict. But I do think Allen Robinson does have a lot of talent, and based upon his consistency over his career in Jacksonville and Chicago, I see no reason why Allen Robinson wouldn't really ball out to get an even bigger contract in 2021, as he is currently on the franchise tag for the Chicago Bears. Next up, a wide receiver on a team that I am just sucking off completely in every single video in the must-own quarterbacks, running backs, wide receiver, and tight end. I talked about a guy on the Los Angeles Chargers, and this is Kennan Allen, the man with the silkiest feet, I would say, in the NFL, the greatest route runner based in the NFL right now. Kennan Allen, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Chargers, current underdog ADP 29.2. Allen Robinson's was 33.4, so they go around the same range. When I was looking at draft rankings for fantasy based upon Fantasy Pros, they had Allen Robinson ranked higher than Kennan Allen, but again, it's not too much of a discrepancy. If I was going wide receiver round 2, round 3, these are the two guys that I am going to be heavily targeting in 2021. Now, Kennan Allen had a great season last year, despite only playing in 14 games, finishing as wide receiver 12 in PPR, wide receiver 14 half PPR, and wide receiver 18 in standard. From a points per game perspective, Mr. Allen was wide receiver 6 in PPR, 11 in half PPR, and 14 in standard, tied with Brandin Ayuk, averaging 17.5 PPR points per game, 14.4 half PPR points per game, and 10.4 standard points per game, in a Chargers offense that started off with Tyrod Taylor, and then obviously Tyrod, I make this joke in every video, got hit with the 1-2 stabberoo, and then boom, now Kennan Allen is getting the ball thrown to from Justin Herbert, who in my opinion was just way better than Tyrod Taylor. I didn't think he would be way better, but it turned out that he was. To me, Tyrod Taylor is not a very good quarterback at this point in his career. So Kennan Allen gets Justin Herbert, and Justin Herbert is just feeding this guy the fucking ball game in and game out. And kind of just like with Allen Robinson, there's no true wide receiver 2 in LA. Now, I kind of lied a little bit, right? Because the Chargers have Mike Williams, but Mike Williams is so inconsistent. And that's what sucks about him, because frankly, I love Mike Williams. I love the talent. I love the guy who can just go up and snag basically any ball when it's thrown to him. That's just how talented he is. But frankly, week in, week out, he is just not very consistent, but Kennan Allen is. He had 147 targets last season, which I think was, oh no, that is just ranked 4th at the wide receiver position, or ranked 5th. He's just right behind Allen Robinson in targets with 147. He had a grand total of 100 receptions, 5th highest at wide receiver for 992 receiving yards, 16th highest at wide receiver and 8 total touchdowns, 13th highest at the wide receiver position, and that's with rookie Justin Herbert, right? The rookie version, the one who no one believed in, wins the offensive rookie of the year. Now think about it going into a second year. Now, some people don't like that I hate on Anthony Lynn in every video. Now, in reality, Anthony Lynn wasn't the worst coach in the NFL, right? He just makes a lot of fatal mistakes for the team, like not knowing when to call a timeout, things like that. In reality, he wasn't a shitty head coach, but I think a head coaching change was needed in LA, and that could help out Herbert even further. Now, I also think that the offensive line being better bodes very well for Kennan Allen, and the fact that they will now have a better running game if Eckler can stay healthy with a more distinguished offensive line. They bring Corey Linsley in the offseason to add a good center for Justin Herbert. I think really Kennan Allen's upside is immense, especially since I believe the Chargers will be a legitimately very solid team in 2021 that could contend with the Chiefs in their division to potentially win the division. Am I saying they will? No, but I'm saying they could contend and play quite well. So I do think that the Chargers are being heavily slept on. I do think that Kennan Allen is a guy that has been ultra consistent throughout his career, and with this new bolstered offense in LA, I think that Kennan Allen could put up even bigger numbers in 2021. And say he doesn't, he plays exactly the same, then you're very happy at where you drafted him based upon his current ADP. We're about halfway through this wide receiver dissection like we're in science class, so if you guys have ended up enjoying this video, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. I would really appreciate it. So the next guy I want to be talking about here is we're going from the Chargers in LA to the other LA team. I believe they play in the same stadium, I think. Yeah, they do. From Kennan Allen to Cooper Kupp, wide receiver of the LA Rams. But Nick, you love Robert Woods. I thought you liked Robert Woods. I do like Robert Woods. I love Robert Woods. But seems like Cooper Kupp's going to be going about a round discount to Robert Woods, which I also very much like. Cooper Kupp had a down year in 2021, or in 2020, if I'm being honest with you, and it's not because he was injured or anything. He actually played in 15 games, so he only missed one, so it wasn't due to injury necessarily. It just wasn't the greatest year for him. He was very inconsistent compared to the past. I would say normally you have Cooper Kupp just week in, week out. He's like 13, 14 plus points every single week. You feel very consistent and happy with him in your lineup, but this year he was kind of going up and down, and to me that's because of the inconsistency at the quarterback position from Jared Goff. In 15 games, Cooper Kupp finished at wide receiver 26 in PPR, 27.5 PPR, and wide receiver number 34 in standard, meaning from a points per game perspective, Cooper Kupp was wide receiver 30 in PPR, 35.5 PPR, tied with Odell and Sterling Shepard, and wide receiver 39 in standard, averaging 13.9 PPR points per game, 10.8 half PPR points per game, and 7.8 standard points per game, tied with Hollywood Brown. So Cooper Kupp didn't have the greatest season, like I said. So we can look at his numbers, and we can try to figure out what really went wrong. 125 targets, 16th highest at wide receiver. That's very good. 92 receptions, 9th highest at wide receiver. The yards just really weren't there. 969, very nice. I like. 20th at wide receiver, and 3 total touchdowns. Okay? So he wasn't really the greatest, but he's still in an offense that is very good with a revitalized quarterback position going from Goff to Matthew Stafford. You also have a great head coach, and you have a wide receiver that throughout his career, just like Allen, just like Robinson, are ultra consistent. But Nick, you just said he wasn't consistent last year. I know. He really wasn't. He wasn't the same Cooper Kupp last year on a week in, week out basis, but he is the slot receiver on a team that's going to be putting up points, on a team that likes to give the ball to the slot receiver. Now, Matthew Stafford is not necessarily known to just feed the slot, but again, it's kind of hard to cover Woods and Kupp and Higbee and Deshaun Jackson and Tutu Atwell, right? It's going to be hard to do that, and I think that Cooper Kupp's role will be much better in this offense when he has a much better quarterback with the team that's going to be much better. I think they're going to take a extreme leap from what we saw in 2020 versus 2021. Obviously, they made the playoffs last year, but it didn't look too good in that game, right? Didn't look too good, but I think that in the future, it will look much better with Matthew Stafford. Kupp, again, a very safe pick. I understand if some people like to go a little bit more risky, that maybe Kupp isn't your guy, right? Because every single week, you just feel very confident with Kupp in your lineup, aside from last season. But again, just throw that away a little bit. Try to not think too in-depth about that. Just think about the new quarterback, the new offense, and how beautiful it should be with Cooper Kupp there in LA. Final player I want to be talking about, who used to be on the LA Rams, now on the Houston Texans, Brandin Cooks, wide receiver of the Houston Texans, underdog ADP 94.0. I don't know if I said Cooper Kupp's ADP, so his was ADP on underdog 52.7, and then Cook's underdog ADP is 94.0. So what obviously the biggest elephant in the room here with Houston is what is going to happen with Watson. I don't know. Again, I've said this in every single video. I've talked about Deshaun Watson, and even more recently, I frankly have zero idea how many games this guy is going to play in 2021, or if he's going to even step on the field at all. So that's going to throw a wrench into things. Right now, we don't know anything. We don't. In September, in August, hopefully we know more on this situation, whether Watson will play or not, because obviously if Watson didn't do what he was alleged to do and he's able to play, then Cooks is going to be really good. Really good, because this offense will still be fine because Watson is that good. But if Watson doesn't play, then Cooks is going to suck, probably. But I think I'd still be willing to take the risk based on where he goes, because I think his ADP right now is like adjusted to maybe Watson will play or maybe Watson won't play. To me, that's how I would be looking at it if I'm drafting right now in best ball. Maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't. So he's like a later pick, but maybe he could go up slightly or down slightly if Watson is gone. So that's just kind of how I would think about it if I was drafting right now. So Brandin Cooks last season literally was the sneakiest top 20 wide receiver in fantasy football, because I think if you asked anyone who was playing fantasy last year, they would have zero idea that Brandin Cooks was a top 20 wide receiver in 15 games, finishing as wide receiver 17 in PPR, 15 half PPR, and wide receiver number 16 in standard. From a points per game perspective, Cooks was wide receiver 16 in PPR, tied with Mike Evans, wide receiver 18 and a half PPR, wide receiver 17 in standard, tied with Allen Robinson, averaging 15.5 PPR points per game, 12.8 half PPR points per game, and 10.1 standard points per game, with the unaddition of Will Fuller, taking Will Fuller out of this offense, who's now in my Miami Dolphins, fins up. So now it's just fucking Brandin Cooks. It is. Who else is there? No one. It's just Brandin Cooks. And even if Tyrod Taylor or Davis Mills is the starter, then I think Cooks could still be good. I think he could still be good. Call me crazy, but I think that there is a scenario where Brandin Cooks, being the wide receiver one on a team that is going so late in the draft, he's the number one wide receiver on the team, the number one target on the team, and he's going this late. Now, I understand the quarterback complications is going to throw people away from Brandin Cooks, but just try to think about it from the perspective that it's worth a shot this late in the draft just to draft the wide receiver one on a team. That's all you have to think about it. That's why he's must-own, because of where he is going in the draft. If he was like a top 5 round pick, there's no way in hell you're touching Brandin Cooks. But where he is going at right now, I definitely believe he is worth the risk. Last season, Brandin Cooks had 119 targets, 18th highest at the wide receiver position for 81 receptions. For 19th highest at wide receiver, he had over 1,000 receiving yards, 1,143 receiving yards. There's no way anyone thought he did that. There's no way, because I had him on my dynasty team, and I didn't even realize he was playing that good. He had 6 total touchdowns, 24th highest at wide receiver. He put up a big season. So again, just think about the fact that he's the wide receiver one in the team. Try to throw away the quarterback situation and just try to believe in the upside of Brandin Cooks. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying today's video, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. I love each and every single one of you guys so much. Make sure to stay safe. Happy Tuesday. Tomorrow's my birthday, and I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Fucking Tay-Tay Swizzle up in here. Thank you guys again for everything. Gonna keep on growing. See you beautiful bastards tomorrow. Good boy.